You're listening to the 40 Thrive Podcast, Episode 4.
You're listening to the 40 Thrive Podcast, the show created for women 40 and beyond, ready to shake things up. Get exclusive access to expert advice, support, and strategies that will inspire, motivate, and give you the tools to not just survive, but thrive. And now, your host, Jackie McDougall.
Hey, welcome to the 40 Thrive Podcast. I'm so grateful you're here today. If you're a woman over 40 who's ready to stop going through the motions and create a life on your own terms, this podcast was created for you. And today's episode is just the boost we all need to finish off the year strong. I'm not really sure how we got here, but 2018 is wrapping up. It felt like 10 minutes ago we were on the beach, right? If you're thinking about how to end the year strong, maybe you're thinking about 2019 and setting goals. Historically, I've been one of those all or nothing resolution failures. You know the ones where we look at the next year as it's going to be the year. It's going to be a total game changer and it's going to be amazing and I'm going to be in the best shape and my finances are going to be great and all of those things. In fact, 2018 was the first year that I looked at my life and my business as one big work in progress, and I'm totally cool with that. In fact, that has been the biggest game changer for me, not the expectation of being perfect, but just knowing that every day, day in and day out, that I just show up and do my best, but not expect that unattainable level out of myself all the time. So I feel more productive now and more clear on what I want. And I definitely feel more joy and gratitude for the life I have. And the secret really was to just let go of the pressure that I put on myself to be doing it right and at full speed all the time. Some of the things that I did in 2018 to kind of change that perspective was I took action when I didn't feel 100% ready. How many of you are like, I want to do this thing, but I'm not totally ready? I know for me, I'm still not ready to have kids and I have 3 of them and they're teenagers. So there's that. But, I think it's really important that we begin, jump in, start to do something, try it, even when we don't feel 100% ready. Another thing in 2018 that I've really tried to do is beat myself up less when I make a mistake. Mistakes are going to happen, but it's that beating ourselves up afterwards where it just carries on and on and on. So I'm really trying to give myself that grace and gratitude to just let it go when it's time to let it go. And the third thing I did that I think made all of the difference in the world was I leaned out of that must do all things for all people all of the time existence. I don't necessarily have to constantly be pleasing other people and providing care and leadership in every circumstance, every single second of my life. And it has been such a relief to live in this way where, guess what? Somebody else might take control of that situation and it may be done in a way that is not exactly how you would have done it, and that's okay. So I know for me, when it comes to truly 40 thriving, these are really important steps that I have taken and continue to take in order to live a better existence. But I have to say, one of the best things that I have done in 2018 was to learn that through connections and collaborations with other like-minded women, we can do anything. To be able to work through some of the struggles in our heads, to bounce ideas off of each other, it makes a huge difference. So whether it's a mastermind for you and your business, or it's just coffee with somebody who lives up the street, I think the focus on connecting with other women and having a tribe in your life, it is so important. And it can be the difference between feeling lonely and struggling and really being able to get through your day. So I highly encourage you to seek out other women, whether it's online or in real life, in the coming year, to build those connections and to build those strong relationships. One of the women who's made such an impact on my life in 2018 is the brilliant and very ballsy Diann Wingert. If you attended either of the 40 Thrive events in 2018, you have seen her speak. She is funny. She is candid. She is not afraid to get into it. And you're in luck because you get to hear from her today. But real quick, before we get started, I invite you to head over to 40thrive.com and download your 10 tips to start thriving today. It's totally free and something I created for you to help take those small action steps toward more purpose, fulfillment, and joy. Get your 10 tips to start thriving today at 40thrive.com. Okay, so as I was saying, Diann Wingert is a midlife maven and reinvention mentor. Diann helps women in their prime to transform the life they've got into the one they really want. After 2 decades of being a successful therapist, Diann changed careers and became a master's level certified coach. Diann's all about helping women over 40 ditch their excuses, discover their courage, and go after their most audacious goals. She passionately believes that this stage of life is the most powerful if we're willing to let go of whatever's holding us back. Since turning 40, Diann has gotten divorced, raised her 3 children to adulthood, embraced Buddhism, traveled the world, gone skydiving, studied German, remarried, and became a first-time entrepreneur. Now she's in her 6th decade and looking forward to continuing to learn, evolve, and defy her own limits. Diann, welcome to the show.
I'm so happy to be here, Jackie.
I am so happy to have you, and I'm so happy to say the words midlife maven.
I love that.
At what point did you decide I am the midlife maven?
I think someone else actually referred to me as that, and I wasn't entirely sure that I knew what the word was initially. So, of course, I had to excuse myself and go Google it. And as soon as I did, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's accurate.
Like, would you ever consider yourself a midlife maven before they said it?
No, and I think it's probably one of the things that's been most fascinating for me about being at this stage of life is that you have an opportunity to actually get to see yourself more accurately by getting information from others. I think up until, I would say, close to 40, I was just too concerned about fitting in, too concerned about doing the right thing, too concerned about being where I thought I should be, keeping up with everyone else. I wasn't really asking for that kind of feedback. And I think probably around 40, I started noticing that the way people saw me and the way I saw me weren't always lined up. And after that, I started seeking out that feedback. And it's really been fascinating.
I think a lot of women are looking for others to determine who they are. So, I mean, do you wake up one day and have this aha moment that I'm no longer going to be strictly controlled by other people's expectations?
I wish I could say that it was like one pivotal moment, like literally sitting bolt upright in bed and gasping and going, Eureka, I suddenly know who the fuck I am. And oh, by the way, are we allowed to swear on this program?
Go for it. Be yourself.
Awesome. I don't think I could hold myself back. So I think because I do love the dramatic, and I think that it would be very exciting and it would make great storytelling to say it happened like a bolt of lightning. I would say for me, and in my work with women our age, it seems to be more typical that we have a series of unfortunate events or fortunate events that cumulatively create this awareness. And then it kind of maybe clicks into place through listening to a podcast, reading a book, reading a blog post, going to an event, or even a casual comment from a friend. And then it's like that last little jigsaw puzzle piece falls into place, and then you sort of see the picture that's been developing for a while.
That's fascinating. And, people come to you for advice, for guidance, for expertise. And that's probably the reason that they're tuning into this podcast. You are an expert. You are a former therapist. You are a life coach. But I want to go back because one of the things I love most about you is that you share your own experiences in life, and they're not all pretty, as much as we like to think, but you don't just come from a place of expertise. You come from a place of experience. And one of the things I see in the 40 Thrive group are women who are maybe not feeling it somewhere in their lives and they're not really sure how to make a change. And you've sort of made a career out of making changes.
That's another thing that I have realized sort of in a latent way. I seem to be the person who throughout life goes through relatively long periods where things are very stable, things are very calm, things are just kind of humming along. And then I start to feel a little restless, a little discontent, a little less than satisfied, and that feeling starts to grow. And when it reaches a certain critical mass or a tipping point, I must take action. And when I reach that point, I tend to make big, dramatic changes in multiple areas of my life at once. The first time this happened to me, I didn't really think anything about it. By the time it had happened 2 or 3 times, I started thinking, something's really wrong with you, Diann, because this is just not normal. I was a shrink. I know very well how much the majority of people resist change. They fear it, they avoid it, they do everything they can to prevent it. But for some reason, I need it and I seek it out and I create it. Now, in my work now, I find that I attract people who know they need to make a change and maybe even are ready to want to make a change. They just can't get themselves to pull the trigger. So it seems to help me in the work that I do now. But for a very long time, I didn't accept that about myself. I thought that it meant something was really wrong with me. And I frankly got a lot of critical feedback over the years along the lines of, why aren't you ever satisfied? Why can't you just be normal? Why can't you just do what everyone else does? If it's good enough for everyone else, why isn't it good enough for you? What makes you so special? I always found it fascinating that people would see the changes that I felt the need to make in my life and then interpret that as casting a negative light on the fact that they didn't feel the need to do that. So at times I felt sort of attacked by that feedback, but eventually I realized I have to live my life for me and the way that feels right to me. So I just got better at handling the criticism, I guess.
Right. Do you think that the criticism existed because they felt they didn't need to make the changes in their lives, or that they were too afraid to make the changes in their lives?
It's really a good question. Of course, I can't know for sure what anyone was thinking unless they told me. But I think they were either, I think there were probably several camps. I think there were people that were horrified by it because they are the kind of people who, they're always going to the same restaurants, ordering the same meals. They've had the same friends since kindergarten. They would never dream of moving out of their hometown and things like that. Those are the people that are very, very, very averse to change. Then there are the outliers on the other end who are constantly seeking change, the serial entrepreneurs and big risk takers and people that are constantly moving and changing careers and stuff. And then everyone else is somewhere along the continuum in the middle. So I would think that the majority of people who gave critical feedback were either confused / fascinated by it and didn't really understand it. So maybe they were seeking understanding by making that comment and hoping I would respond in a way that would make it make more sense for them. But I, to your point, I really think there probably were women who really wanted to make changes, but when they added up the balance sheet, it just seemed too risky if things didn't work out the way they hoped they would. And I think that's probably what stops most people from doing things they want to do, whether at this stage of life or a different one.
Right. I feel like a lot of the women that I meet are in that middle ground space. And so it's great to not be so resistant to having or needing any sort of change in your life. I mean, that sounds like a really peaceful place. But then there are women like you and me who constantly need to reinvent and evolve and create huge, I don't want to say drama, but just huge transition that would maybe make somebody else end up in a corner in the fetal position. So I think that you and I are alike a lot in that way. You were 36 when you decided you had a perfectly successful career already in medical sales. At 36, you head back to school. Like, who is going back to school at 36 especially when you've already have a successful career? Become a therapist.
And a husband and 3 school-age kids.
There's that. I mean, I see a lot of women going back to school because they didn't necessarily fulfill that, or maybe they got married, had kids, and didn't necessarily find that career space. But I just want to make that clear. Like, you were already humming along. You were doing great. And then you go back to school to become a therapist, which, that's a lot. Graduate school is not for the weak. And then you become a therapist. But after 2 decades of that, here you are again a few years ago, switching gears again.
Yep.
And leaving that behind and becoming a full-time life coach. So how do you talk to those women in the middle who want to make changes but are nowhere near where you were when you made these massive changes?
I think what you are describing is not only the majority of women, you're describing the majority of my clients. I've had a few people hire me who said, I wanted to hire you two years ago, but I was too scared. I actually had one woman hire me because another coach she was working with dared her to do the scariest thing she could think of. And she had seen me speak at an event. I know this is the only time I've heard this. She said, my other coach dared me to do the scariest thing I could think of. And I remember being so intimidated by you at this event that I decided, working with her is the scariest thing. I didn't really like that. I don't want to be scary. I don't want to be intimidating. And I don't want anyone to look at me as some sort of freak of nature who is able and willing to create big, meaningful change and take big risks in her life. Because if they see me as someone who has abilities that they lack, they will not recognize how much I can help them. So I sometimes have to do a lot of explaining that if you are a client of mine, you do not, for example, as I did, have to jump out of an airplane on your 60th birthday. That is not a requirement. You do not need to leave a long-term marriage. You do not need to change careers, not once but twice. You do not need to learn a foreign language in your 50s. You don't need to do any of those things. I have done those things because that's what I felt I needed to do to continue to evolve. But most women are going to be very satisfied with change on a much more moderate level. So I think what tends to happen, because I've studied neuroscience extensively and have a really good working knowledge of the brain and the mind, is that our brains are lazy and they don't want to work that hard. You think about this. You've got this 3 pounds of tofu in your head. And this, I say tofu because actually it's not tofu, but it has the consistency of tofu. It's very watery and sort of, wiggly. And it only takes up 3 pounds, but it consumes 25% of the calories your entire body needs every single day. So because it's a calorie hog, it doesn't want to work that hard because it'll blow through the calories that you take in really, really fast. So because of this, the brain doesn't want to work hard. That means the brain doesn't want you to think new thoughts, feel new feelings, take new actions, or risks and changes in your life. It wants you to do what you've always been doing. So one day you wake up and have a thought, I'm not so sure I'm really all that satisfied in this career I've been in for the last 20 years. And you start to daydream a little bit about what you might want to do instead. Within minutes, your brain is going to go, whoa, hold on a second. Worst idea ever. Do not under any conditions even think about that. All these terrible things will happen. Your husband will leave you. Your kids will be ashamed. You'll lose all your money and have to live in a van by the river. All of this stuff. So because of that, we have an overwhelming sense of anxiety and we believe those thoughts. We see them as wisdom, and we walk away from fantasizing about that change. It happens so consistently that most people, maybe from the outside, it looks like a woman is settling, but she's just listening to her brain, trying to not work hard, and just not understanding that that's what's happening. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And I think that it's so easy to listen to your brain, who's in control, who is telling you not to work so hard or not to make it work so hard. And then you look back and you feel regret for the things that you didn't try. It's very confusing at this period of time, I believe, because a lot of women have been working for other people, whether it's in career or in family or in friendships or relationships. And so to then have this need inside in your bones, you can feel it, that you want to make these changes, but your brain is working against you. You really need some guidance to be able to push through, I believe, in most circumstances.
I totally agree. And some women are able to get that guidance in the form of a self-help book or an online course or a workshop. But if the changes that she's contemplating making are really meaningful and life-changing, she probably needs a midlife maven and mentor to help her not only think through it, but learn how to manage her brain and calm her emotions and deal with all the feedback that she is no doubt going to invite from other people who might have some opinions about what she's doing that don't agree with hers.
Right. Well, you've said in the past at the 2 events I've had that you've spoken at that you blew up your life in your 40s. And I think women are terrified of that. And so they don't make any changes because most people don't want to blow up their lives. So how do you know if something is a positive change that should happen or if you just are feeling the itch and that you're about to blow things up?
That's really such a good question because you're talking about, I think, the difference between a midlife awakening and a midlife crisis. A midlife crisis is what I believe I had at 40. And honestly, I've sometimes referred to what happened to me at 50 was another midlife crisis, but it actually wasn't. I blew up my life at 40 because I truly did not understand why I was not suddenly, but profoundly unhappy in my life and why the need to change something, literally everything, felt urgent and necessary. A lot of that was hormonal. Since then, I've learned a great deal about perimenopause and menopause and all that comes after. I'm sorry to say, probably more than many doctors do, because most gynecologists don't know nearly as much about perimenopause and menopause as they do about menstruation, pregnancy, and childbearing. So I had to kind of educate myself because here I was an intelligent, educated, sane woman, I thought, and I felt like I had sort of lost control of myself in a way. Now, I'm not saying that I regret the decisions I made or the changes I made. And honestly, I wouldn't want to go back to the life that I had before 40. But I had no idea what was really happening inside of me. And one of the things I realize now is that young women oftentimes don't really understand why they're making the decisions they're making. So they're following the herd. They are conditioned by the media. They are obeying their parents. They are shaped by their culture or their religion or their ethnic group. And they're just doing the things that they feel are the right things to do based on what others expect. And that actually feels pretty good in your 20s. because taking that much responsibility for yourself and figuring all of that out on your own feels terrifying. And then you're in your 30s and you're just kind of living with those decisions. But after about 20 years, almost every woman is starting to question those really critical choices. And let's face it, who really knows who the hell they are at 20 or 25 when those decisions are being made? So I think that's really, to me, and this is not exactly a midlife issue per se, but I believe now at this stage of life, the number one reason why so many women feel like they want to blow up their life at 40 is as a result of three things. One, they do not understand how their mind and brain work, because nobody teaches that. Mm-hmm. They should teach it. They should teach it to children in public school, but they don't. So we don't really understand how our mind and brain work. And so we're being influenced by things that we don't really understand. Two, we don't really understand the effect of our hormones on our thoughts, our emotions, our choices, all of that. And three is that we make the most important decisions for our lifetime when we're too young and inexperienced to really even know who we are. And I think that is what adds up to a midlife crisis and the desire to blow up your life.
Fascinating, because there are not many areas outside of those core decisions that you make, family, career, things like that, that you actually make as a young person that you have to continue that same decision as you get older. Do you know what I mean? Like, for example, if I made a decision at 25, I didn't get married until I was 31, but those decisions don't really impact too much where I am today. But marriage and children and a potential career, those decisions at a young age really do. You're not the same person later. And so you're trying to figure out, hey, I can't just walk away from all of this necessarily, but I'm not the same person. So how do you kind of get those two things in the flow of what you've decided then and where you are now?
Yeah, that absolutely is. I'm going to put my former therapist hat on for a minute. I think that, if you think about life, in terms of our development as a human being and the different stages that we go through and the different things that we need to sort of master at each stage, the midlife stage of life is really all about sorting through the choices that we've made and the life that we have constructed around those choices, and then recommitting to them or making the changes we need to make to bring new choices into our life that are actually better suited to the person we've become. This is not easy. It can be traumatic. It can be painful. There can be significant losses. But I've also seen many people who have honestly started living for the first time in their 40s because, and it could be something like I've known people personally and worked with people who were gay, and they had been living as a straight person in a heterosexual marriage with children and a whole thing because culturally or based on their faith tradition or their family of origin, they simply could not accept that that's who they were. So they pretended not to be. Then they got into their 40s and they just couldn't pretend anymore. Or they were in the wrong career, or they really wanted to be living in the country and they're living in the city, or they really wanted to be living alone and they're not. Or, and I think that sometimes it does happen. You asked me about this, just happen in a moment or over time. For me, it was kind of a dawning awareness over time. But some people, literally, those thoughts are coming, trying to break through to their conscious mind, and they sort of shoo them away. And then the thoughts come and they shoo them away, and the thoughts come and shoo them away. Sometimes you have to exert a lot of effort to shoo the thoughts away. And some of the popular things people do to sort of suppress that is eating, drinking, shopping, numbing out on Netflix, all the things that I consider buffering. Sometimes when we're doing a lot of buffering, It's because there's something our unconscious wants to get through and get to our attention. And it's so uncomfortable to face that we just keep pushing it away. And as it keeps coming, as we get older, you need to buffer more and more to make it go away. Now, that doesn't explain all overeating and overdrinking and overspending and all that. But I think for a lot of people it does. And then sometimes inexplicably, you just stop doing that and say, okay, what is it that I'm not facing? I actually have a client right now. I mostly work with women, but I do work with some men. And I have a gentleman who's a physician that I'm working with. He's in another country. And I love working virtually because geography is not a boundary. And he became a doctor because his father was a doctor. And their family were immigrants. And becoming a doctor was the highest form of achievement that would make his father proud. And this client knew he didn't want to be a doctor, and but he did it because that was what was expected of him. He's now in his mid-50s, and the work that we are doing together is sort of uncovering what he always knew he wanted to do and what he is very likely to now start doing in his life. And that's very, very satisfying for me. But those are a lot of years spent doing something for, I wouldn't say it's the wrong reasons, but I do think that people at midlife are no longer as willing to do things for the sake of others as they have been up to this point. Don't you agree?
I do agree. I think that you get to the point where you realize whether you've lost people in your life through death or divorce or just the end of a relationship, you start to kind of see not just the end game, that we don't have as much time as we think and that life is precious and all of those things. But I think that you just realize that some of the stuff we hold on to is so ridiculous and that it doesn't really matter in the long run. And I just remember, even look at the internet. When we first started putting our opinions on the internet, I had to, no opinion was left unsaid when it came to me. I let people know, and it was like I was going to change minds right there. And now I read things and I go, oh, that's ridiculous. And sometimes I start to type and I erase, and sometimes I just move on. But I think you realize that what's important and what should be the priorities, and what are those things that are taking your energy away or making your energy negative that don't really even need to exist in your life.
I think the lucky ones and the smart ones are the ones who realize that. I've known people in their 70s who are still ridiculous, which is really sad. I mean, in fact, I'm trying to remember where I heard this, but I heard once getting older is mandatory, growing up isn't. So I think that growing up means like kind of getting a grip on what really matters and just noticing that your values do evolve over time, and what you used to think was like ridiculously important now you just think is ridiculous.
Right.
But it means you have to here's another piece of this that I think is important and very interesting, is that we get very attached to our identity. Like your identity is I'm a wife. I'm a wife of a whatever. I am the mother of 3. I am the mother of a special needs child. I'm a social worker. I'm a lawyer. I'm a whatever. We have these identities and we get very attached to those identities. Mm-hmm. And when it comes time for us to evolve to the next phase and perhaps do something different, it's the ego that is clinging to that former identity and telling us, you really want to give all this up? Well, yeah, if it's holding you back, what are you actually giving up?
Right. I think you're absolutely right in that we are so used to falling under a specific identity that we don't know how to kind of strip ourselves of all the adjectives and just be who it is that we want to be. So I want to go back for a second, though, to that question of, so you have somebody who's ready to make a change in their lives or in their life, and they're not really sure how. And I know you work with people in order to do this. How do you take that first step? I mean, it's really hard to know, A, is this really what I want? So I like that there's a little bit of, you've been living it. I like that there's thought behind it, that you've been living with something for a while, you know it's not for you anymore, you're ready to shed it, or you're ready to move forward. Don't make those decisions overnight and under the influence of a half a bottle of wine. Great.
Exactly.
Check.
Yeah.
So now I've made this decision to change my life, to shed myself of some of these things that no longer serve me. How do I move forward in a way that is best for me and, I hate to say it, but those around me? Because we don't all just live in a bubble where our actions don't impact other people. And so there may be a woman who wants to change careers, but she's the breadwinner and they've got 4 kids. Or there may be a woman who wants to leave a marriage, but for whatever reason, there are barriers or other people to consider. So how do you do you have a formula, or do you have a path that you take with your decisions and how to do it, or that you coach your clients?
I do. I have a blueprint that I follow, and it has to be customized to each person because we're all unique and
of course
have different circumstances. But where I start is with several assumptions. And I think lots of times people want tips and tricks and strategies, and they want sort of the quick fix because they're feeling unhappy, uncomfortable, restless. They just want to feel better quick. But I think we're shortchanging ourselves when we go that way. So where I actually start with my clients who are at this very point is by removing obstacles to clarity. And one thing, for example, is a lot of people, I'll say why. I interrogate their thinking, and I teach them how to interrogate their own thinking. Interrogate that's a little bit of a provocative word, but really, really question their thinking about it. And what I find oftentimes is lots of times we think we're unhappy, we think we're unsatisfied, we think we're unfulfilled, but the reality is we're bored. And the reason we're bored is not because our spouse is boring or our job is boring. It's that we're not fully committed to it. We are not giving it our best. We are not giving it our all. And we think that it isn't doing enough for us to for us to want to give our all. For example, you know how you often hear people say, well, I don't get paid enough to deal with this crap.
Yes.
Right? Well,
I may have said that to my children this morning.
No doubt. Yeah, especially because you're not getting paid to be a mom at all, right?
Exactly.
But I think oftentimes we don't really realize what our expectations are. For example, lots of times young women get married because they think it's going to make them feel secure. Or they take a certain career path because they think it's going to make them confident. Or they marry a certain person because they think it's going to make them feel loved. So when we make critical life decisions, like, should I have another kid? Or should I marry this guy or that guy? And should I take this path or that path? If we're making it based on assumptions and expectations that this path, this person, this choice is going to make me feel happy, fulfilled, loved, secured, proud, esteemed, whatever, that is the beginning of the problem, because it is our job to create those feelings in ourselves. It is not our partner's job, our kid's job, or our career's job. So the first order of business in the people that work with me is kind of getting under their thinking about why they want to make the change. And oftentimes they don't even realize they have this expectation, they have this assumption, well, I don't feel happy now, so this must be the wrong X. So if I get a new X, I'll feel happier. No, in all likelihood, you are going to be the same person with the same problems in a new location without all the history and social support that you have now. And I have known women who have also blown up their lives and left their husband for someone else, left a career path to do something else, left the country to live somewhere else, and 2 to 3 years later came back. And the reason why is that they didn't really understand why they wanted to change to begin with. So it's really important to me to act with integrity and to not help people make a huge mistake simply because they want to, but to say, well, you may very well be better off in this thing, but let's make really sure of it. Now, I have a really unconventional approach in a lot of ways and an unconventional way of thinking about this, but I don't think you should ever leave a marriage to become happy. I think there is a way to become happy even within a marriage that isn't right for you. And once you're at that place, then you can decide to leave the marriage simply because you want to and because you choose to, not because you think you need to in order to be happy.
That is such, I've never heard that point before in quite that way. And it is perfectly logical, like, duh, but at the same time, I don't know many people who do that, because marriage is hard. And we like to say to people, oh, life's too short. You should be happy. You should be happy. Like, you hear it all the time. But to leave the marriage when you're not in that space of fulfillment within is only going to leave you feeling exactly the same way, just as you say, in a different location.
Right. You're going to have because I personally believe that our reality is created by the thoughts that we think. Like, the same two women could have the same two life circumstances, same level of education, same level of income. Everything could be like exactly equal. And one of them could feel grateful, content, proud, and satisfied. And the other one could feel sad and resentful and confused and angry with the exact same conditions. So part of the way I coach and the way I teach is that stripping away all of the thoughts and the judgments that we have about our life, about our boss, about our career path, even about ourselves, sort of stripping, I call it like peeling the story off the facts, just sort of getting all the way down to the basic facts and being able to sort of look at them objectively. And that's when you really kind of realize, I'll give you an example just to help this make more sense. Mm-hmm. An example is I've worked with a few women who initially came to work with me thinking that, I'm in my 50s, my kids have left home, I feel unsatisfied. At first I thought it was hormones, and then I thought it was the empty nest, and then I really realized I'm really not happy in my career, and I'm not so sure I love my husband anymore. This is actually very, very common, to just sort of be generally dissatisfied with everything you've got.
Right.
Like all at once. So one woman in particular, as we sort of unpacked her thoughts, what we realized, and she had no idea about this, is that she had never actually forgiven her husband for a brief affair he had 13 years earlier. She just pushed it out of her mind and thought she had forgotten it. But it was like a seed of resentment and bitterness that grew and grew over time and led to her feeling very disconnected from him, understandably. Mm-hmm. And the other thing was that she was also very envious of some of her colleagues who didn't have children, whose careers were much more impressive. And so she was thinking, well, I'm not so happy with my husband, I'm not so happy with my career. But what it really was that she was still mad at him, and she was envious of them and not even aware of those feelings. And so she was on her way to filing for a divorce from her husband and going into another field. And once we kind of unpacked everything, it was like, I had no idea that's what was going on with me. when we finished our coaching together and she was ready to go on with her life, she had decided to stay in the same career and just shift her working hours so that she could start taking a painting class. And I recently got an email from her saying that she and her husband are now taking surfing lessons together.
Wow.
So, and I think that's really something I really want the 40 Thrive community to take away from this interview, is that just because you're feeling like you need a change, you need a drastic change, maybe you need everything to be changed, when you actually get into it and really, and I think it usually does involve some guidance. Some people are able to do it on their own, but most of us don't have the objectivity to really get to that level of honesty with ourselves, because most of these things are frankly in our blind spot. We oftentimes will happily choose the life we already have with some adjustments. I think most marriages, for example, need to be renegotiated at this stage of life because our conditions have changed, but our dynamics haven't. So you don't necessarily need to leave the husband, but you may need a new marriage to the same man.
Right. Such a good point. It's like I compare it a little bit to your house and clutter. You don't burn down your whole house because the house is cluttered. You just focus on a room, maybe start with one room and declutter there. And then when you start to see results, you might be able to make some of those changes in other rooms.
It's usually best to start small and
maybe a drawer.
Yeah. Or even just like, for example, that restless feeling that we start to have at this stage of life. Like, what can you do with that? Can you sign up for, don't sign up for, a 6-month immersion program in Italy so you can learn the language and cook the food and all that. Just go to an Italian restaurant and try out a few phrases on the waiter, but I honestly, there's something else I'm realizing that I need to say, is that I think oftentimes one of the things that leads to this, because women are like, why am I suddenly feeling so unhappy and desperate for change? I think it and I believe I spoke about this at one of your events, the changes that are happening in our body and in our brain as a result of perimenopause and menopause absolutely shift the way you think and feel about yourself and other people and life in general. And because we're no longer under the influence of estrogen the way we have been at the same level, we're no longer in that state where everyone's feelings and wishes and preferences are more important than ours. I mean, it's really kind of a fascinating design that because of estrogen, we want to take care of everyone. We want everyone to be happy with us. We don't want to ruffle any feathers or rock the boat. We want everyone to like us. We want everyone to approve of us. We want to make people happy. It may feel like it's our choice, but a lot of it is our conditioning and our hormones. And when your hormones start to change and you suddenly feel like, I don't give two shits about anybody but me, how come nobody wants to know what I want? You can act a little crazy about that. But if you don't understand why that's happening, then you usually feel a lot of shame and guilt.
Right. I think
that's such a... Do you have those moments? Don't you have those moments?
We all have those moments, but you're absolutely right. I will say that I'm extremely lucky that I am surrounded with women in my life who understand those moments. I think it's really important to find a tribe, whether it's in your own community, on the phone with your girlfriend across the country, or even in the 40 Thrive group. I think it's so important to be able to share some of these feelings, because if you don't, then you find later that it builds and builds and builds and you want to blow it all up, as opposed to just turning to somebody and saying, if I have to make one more effing dinner for these kids that they complain about, this is not personal experience or anything like that.
Of course not.
I want to lose my mind by Friday night. And then Saturday, my husband comes home and he's like, hey, what's for dinner? And I want to throttle him, but instead of leaving them all in a trail of my dust, I try to talk to my girlfriends and then go back to my husband and say, what would be great if Saturday night you handled the dinner. So there's there's, that change in me that I don't necessarily want to nurture every single human around me at all times, but I'm so lucky that I can express those things. And I'm not perfect. I may or may not have expressed those things in front of my husband and children as well. But
memory loss is one of the symptoms of this stage.
But having other women, having a tribe to turn to, somebody who's not going to judge you, somebody who may show you a mirror and say, hey, this thing in your life that you've been complaining about, you've been unhappy with that for a while. I think there's something bigger that you need to change, or just being able to vent depending on what's actually happening in your life. I think is so important. And
having a laugh about it. Like, all the little insults that go along, with the aging process. And I think of them as insults because each new one that arrives, I'm like, what the hell? It's like, that's always my first reaction. I guess it's like the 5 stages of grief and loss. The first one is shock and disbelief.
Right.
So I'm always like, what fresh hell is this? But when you can share it with a friend and say, oh my God, is this happening to you too? And they go, oh, you?
Right.
Like, and then you dish about it and you're like, and then you bust up laughing, and then you're totally adjusted to it already.
Absolutely. When you have a friend in the car who notices, the hair on her chin is probably longer than the hair on her head, and you just happen to keep tweezers in the car,
I give tweezers out as stocking stuffers. To
oh my gosh,
my
that's
friends.
Brilliant. I am so going to brand 40 Thrive tweezers.
Oh my God, I love that. And also reading glasses with 40 Thrive on the earpiece.
Totally. Absolutely. Branded. So I want to make sure that we cover a couple of things before I let you go, because I want to keep you forever and just talk to you forever. But you talk about the fact that you're in your 6th decade. And we all know 40 Thrive starts at 40. I think a big misconception is that it's just for women in their 40s, but that's not the case. It's really where it starts. So 40s, 50s, 60s, wherever you feel like you could use a little motivation, inspiration. And so, I feel like you're sort of the ghost of Christmas future a little bit for some of the women in the group. So what are some things that we can expect? Because when you talk about the hormones, understanding where things come from, why you feel the way you feel. What are some things that we have to look forward to, Diann, that you can shed a little light on? So in the future we go, oh, that's what Diann said in the podcast.
Yeah, really good question. So no, this is great because I did not have a good relationship with my mother. So everything that I experienced felt unexpected to me. I didn't have that kind of mom or a big sister, an auntie, or anyone like that who would say, well, you should be watching out for this. So I am very happy to do that for the younger listeners among us. I would say the decade of, the turning 40 and being in your 40s is coming to terms with the fact that you are no longer young, but you are absolutely not old. And there is more than enough time to catch up if you feel that you're behind, to switch gears if you feel that you are on the wrong playing field, and to fulfill wishes, dreams, and ambitions that you had kind of written off. I think that you have more than enough time to do that. And but you kind of have to really maximize your 40s. I think you would do well to inform yourself about perimenopause by really taking responsibility for your own well-being and not assuming that your doctor is responsible for that. It's your body, so you need to know what you're dealing with. And really learn about that, really, really come to understand what perimenopause is all about. So you don't feel like you're losing your marbles, and you can kind of anticipate and really, I think, start to make the changes in your daily habits and in your self-care that will keep you really feeling like you're in your prime. Now, once you get in your 50s, the average age of onset for genuine menopause is 51. So sometime in your early 50s, if it hasn't already happened, your periods will stop, and then you will start experiencing menopause symptoms in earnest. At that point in time, your body is no longer really producing estrogen, so you're going to notice all those little annoying physical symptoms, the hot flashes, the night sweats, the weight gain, the libido changes, all of that sort of stuff, which there are wonderful treatments for. Nothing is better than being educated and well-informed and taking responsibility for your well-being. I had to fire several different gynecologists before I found one who was really willing to partner with me to help me feel the way I was used to feeling. So I think turning 50, we tend to become better advocates for ourselves. We tend to become a little bit less concerned about what everyone else is thinking and doing, and much more concerned with our needs and our wants. A lot of women do experience some depression at this stage. That's partly due to hormones and partly due to giving in to fears that, you know, the life I have is the one I'm stuck with. Sort of like I made my bed and I just need to stay in it kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And if you need professional help, whether that's a therapist, a coach, medication, by all means, get it. Do not suffer in silence. Surround yourself with people. And by the time you're 60, I think what I've noticed is that you're definitely experiencing more physical changes. But I anticipated that in my late 50s and realized, okay, I'm kind of a little bit of a control freak. I don't really like to be surprised unless it's a party for my birthday or something. So that's April 14th for you, Jackie, by the way.
Noted.
But anyway, but what I'm realizing is that I just started looking around at older women in their 70s and beyond and realizing there aren't a lot of role models that I'm aware of, at least not in my particular circle. So believe it or not, a couple of years ago, as I was preparing to turn 60, I started searching online and I created a Pinterest board of images of older women in their mid 60s to mid 80s. And I started collecting pictures. And I started really paying attention to what I should expect in terms of energy level and, physical problems, what type of health issues I might encounter and how I could prepare for them or prevent some of them. And a couple of changes that I made as a result of that were I think my relationship with contact lenses is going to be coming to an end. They're not as comfortable as they used to be because one of the symptoms with menopause is dry eyes. And I don't want to be using a million pharmaceuticals to feel better.
Right.
So I started looking for really cool looking glasses. And I love the idea of having a small collection of them that I could use not only for function, because I'm just about legally blind, but also for as an accessory. I also was wearing 4-inch heels my entire life, and I willingly gave them up before I had to because I was able to retain a sense of control over that. So 2 years ago, I started looking for what I thought were cool looking flats. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to wait until my arches fell or I got bunions or back pain or whatever. I wanted to give it up. Yeah, I wanted to give it up by choice so that I could retain a sense of dignity and control. So I would say that at this stage of my life, that's kind of how I'm leading with it. I have a very positive attitude about aging because I see no upside to being pessimistic or negative. I am not unaware of the fact that the body deteriorates as we get older, but I don't have to propel myself along with pessimistic and negative thoughts about it. I will do the best I can to take good care of myself, and whatever is going to come my way, I hope to face it with good humor and good grace. That's my plan.
That is fantastic. And I love the way you just described so many people where we discover we're getting older. And so we then behave in ways that, intensify
make it worse
and make it happen more quickly, So I love that there's a little bit of preservation for you.
What do you mean preservation? You mean like embalming fluid? Or?
No, I just mean preserving what is working within your body. I know you exercise regularly. You're
7 days a week.
You're wearing shoes that maybe ultimately will be better for your back.
You know what I think, Jackie, for me is that, coming back to the earlier part of this conversation, is that I have learned to make friends with change and get really good at it. And I'm really good at helping other people embrace change, both the changes that they feel happen to them and those that they would seek voluntarily. And that's how I'm facing aging. I am choosing to discover, I imagine sometime in the next few years, my hair is going to start turning silver or white. And I'm looking forward to seeing how I look when that's my look, instead of thinking, oh God, I'm going to have to keep coloring my hair. I can keep coloring it if I want, but I'm kind of curious, what would I look like with a really cool, hip hairstyle when my hair is white or silver?
Right. Absolutely. I love the way you embrace it.
I'm looking forward to it.
You are an inspiration, my friend.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. So one thing I ask all of my guests is, what does 40 Thrive mean to you?
What 40 Thrive means to me, and I agree with you, Jackie, 40 is just the beginning. Every single day since then, I have said, this is the best time in my life. Like, I literally say it out loud in front of my mirror, because I believe that we change the way we feel by changing the way we think. And so I actively program my mind for positive thoughts and to really believe this is the best time of my life. And I'm going to keep on thinking that all the way up till the end. Mm-hmm. I think at 40, you have the opportunity to be a grown-ass woman and take charge of your life, take full responsibility for your life, make decisions about who you want to be, irregardless of what everyone else thinks or what they're doing, and make the most of it. You have more than enough time. Everything I've read states that most women in our age group are going to live into our 90s. So to me, that means your life isn't even half over.
Right.
Get busy making it count, and don't settle for just getting by. Make the most of it. That's what Thrive means to me.
I love it. So Diann, I know there are women listening to this podcast who are thinking, Diann is the person to help me get from where I am to where I want to be. How would they best reach you?
I would love it if they would visit my website, thedrivenwoman.com. They can hop on my email list or send me a contact form and get in touch. I do offer a free 30-minute consultation for anyone who's thinking they might want to know more about working with me. We spend some time together on Zoom, figure out if we're a good fit. If not, I will give them some direction about where they might go instead.
Awesome. Diann Wingert, thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. I will come back anytime.
Make sure you head over to thedrivenwoman.com and get your free consultation, because she will change your life. I am telling you right now. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to the podcast. Not only will you receive new episodes directly to your phone, tablet, or computer, but you'll also be supporting the show in such a huge but super simple way. Just hit subscribe wherever you're listening to the show. I'm so grateful for your support. Take care and keep thriving.